So today I wanted to do what I was planning on doing the day before Shavuos, but something had come up, or 2 days before Shavuos, but something had come up that Wednesday, and I had to cancel last minute. So I wanted to, and it's still appropriate. They're still feeling Shavuos with us. I wanted to talk about tefillah, prayer. Hi, Karen. I wanted to talk about tefillah through the prism of David HaMelech, where we know that David HaMelech, we had spoken about a couple weeks ago, was how Rus was given the great reward of having David HaMelech kingship come from her, that ultimately Mashiach is going to be the offspring of Rus, due to this one amazing move and mitzvah she did by attaching herself to Naomi, even though, Orpah was very rational decision she made. It wasn't like she did something so horrible that she turned away from Naomi. She was taking care of herself, and Naomi herself said, "Go, what would you stay with me for?" But Rus, took that leap of faith and said, "No, wherever you go, I'll go. That your God is my God," etc. And she ended up sticking with Naomi. Due to that great act, she was given the great reward of having David HaMelech come from her. Now, I want to focus a little bit more on David HaMelech, in that David HaMelech perhaps represents much of what we had discussed about tefillah. David HaMelech represents so much of tefillah. In fact, David HaMelech refers to himself in Tehillim. He refers to himself as Ani Tefillah. The Ani Tefillah, I am Tefillah. He refers to himself as Tefillah. That his nickname was Tefillah. That David HaMelech totally embodied what we are trying to accomplish through prayer, and that's what I want to discuss today. The spring where I want to discuss it from, though, is coming from a little bit of a different vantage point, and that is from a memoir that Rabbi Menachem Penner, who is the Menahel, he's the dean of Reich, of the yeshiva in YU, when Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal passed away in 2016 or 2017. So the yeshiva put out a sefer in his memory that I had the great zchus, that me and three of my friends had the great zchus to be the editors of that book. And we put in the introduction to the book a short hesped. It was a short hesped, that eulogy that Rabbi Penner had given for his Rebbe, Rav Lichtenstein. And he discusses, he makes this comparison between Rav Lichtenstein and David HaMelech. So I want to go through the hesped, and through that we'll be able to gain real insight into, number one, who David HaMelech was, and number two, into how David HaMelech embodied what we've been talking about tefillah. We'll get to that in a minute. So, and for those on Zoom, I apologize, I don't have a PDF that I could share, but as always, we read through everything we discuss. We'll be able to discuss all together. So he begins with a cute story about the anava of Rav Lichtenstein, about the humility of Rav Lichtenstein. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, just to give a little bit of a biography of who he was, Rav Lichtenstein was born in France, and then as a child, he had moved to New York, and he was studying in Yeshivas Reb Chaim Berlin under the tutelage of Rav Yitzchak Hutner. That's how Rav Hutner, one of the great Gedolim of the previous generation. And after some time, his mother wanted him to enroll in Yeshiva University so that he can get a college education as well. Rav Yitzchak Hutner was begging her, pleading with her, not to take Rav Lichtenstein out of Chaim Berlin, not to take him out of the yeshiva, and said he can go study in university, and pleading with her and saying that he's going to be the next Gadol Hador, You cannot. He was only at the time. He was 16 years old. 16 years old at the time. He was a kid, and he was going to be the next guy to the door. You cannot. But ultimately, she made the decision that he transferred over to YU. He did early admissions at the age of 16 years old into Yeshiva University. On his application, that was, it's still in the records of YU. I heard this from Rav Chaim Marcus, whose father, Rav J. Marcus, was a major rabbi in America. He was the rabbi of the Young Israel of Staten Island. It was the largest Orthodox shul in North America until the Bayit in Toronto got huge, and Staten Island got a little bit smaller. It was the largest shul in North America, and they had like 1,200 members or something like that. And Rabbi Marcus later became the founder of Yeshivat Reich Yerushalayim and Beit Shemesh, and made Aliyah. So Rabbi Marcus had worked in the registrar's office at Yeshiva University, and he, just for fun, they have all the records. So he went to go look at, the applications of the Rosh Yeshiva, what their applications looked like. And he fell upon that in Rav Lichtenstein's application. So in the application process, you're supposed to write things that you've learned in the past, right? So just to know, what each student is, coming into, so make sure they're at least up to par with the rest of the student body. So it asks what mesechtas, what tractates you've learned in the past. And on Rav Lichtenstein, you're 16 years old. All that's written is Kulo Shas v'Kula Tanakh, the entire Talmud and all of Tanakh. 16 years old. Kulo Shas v'Kula Tanakh. Rav Lichtenstein was in YU. He ended up marrying the daughter of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Dr. Tova Soloveitchik, Lichtenstein Soloveitchik, and then in 1971 he ended up making Aliyah, and he went to Israel to found Yeshivat Har Etzion in the Gush Etzion, and Rabbi Soloveitchik was very upset at him, actually upset at him. It's been confirmed by multiple sources that he was not happy with that decision. He didn't think that it was right for Lichtenstein to go make Aliyah because
he was more needed in America.
He felt he was more needed in America. He felt he was more needed in. He was the Rosh Kollel at YU. Rav Schechter ended up taking the position of being Rosh Kollel, but Rav Lichtenstein, he was very upset at him. I assume that at some point they ended up, they were very close. It didn't get in the way of their personal relationship, but he was not happy with the decision. In fact, we could really give gratitude to Rav Lichtenstein over the fact that Rav Schechter is in Chinuch. Rav Schechter was planning on becoming a lawyer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Rav Schechter was planning on becoming a lawyer, and Rav Lichtenstein convinced him to go into Chinuch. Yeah, he convinced him. Yeah, right? That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. So we obviously have a lot of hakaras tov for Lichtenstein. He passed away at the age of 82 years old, I believe, 81, 82 years old. I'll never forget they had a live stream of the Levaya in YU. Rav Lichtenstein, when they asked him at his 80th birthday, they asked him what his greatest accomplishment was in life. So his response was not the fact that he built one of the most advanced Hesder yeshivas where boys, study Torah and then also dedicate army service. Not one of the most successful Hesder yeshivas. He didn't talk about his relationship with the Soloveitchik family. He didn't talk about what he had done for Yeshiva University, his or the Sfarim that he wrote. His when they asked him what his greatest accomplishment was, he said his family. That's what he said at the age of 80 years old. His family is his greatest accomplishment. So Rabbi Penner opens up his hesped for Lichtenstein with a cute story that Rabbi Penner was visiting Yeshivat Har Etzion. He had always wanted to go to study with Rabbi Lichtenstein, he went to go visit. He was, a 12th grader in high school. He went to go visit and was standing online for lunch. and he was talking to somebody, and he kind of just like, kind of meandered his way into the middle of the line at lunchtime, and he bumps into someone behind him. He turns around, and it's a fellow without, a bitch, an older looking gentleman. He wasn't wearing a tie; he was just wearing like a jacket, no tie, and no beard. And he says, "I'm sorry," and he continues talking to somebody. And the person he continues talking to, his friend, he had turned all white, right. and his friend, and he says, "What's wrong?" His friend says to him, he says, "Mark, do you know who you just bumped into?" He said, "Who?" He said, "That's the Rosh Yeshiva. That's Rav Lichtenstein." And because that was like Rav Lichtenstein, he was such an anav. He was so humble. Like, I'm just gonna stand online with the rest of the guys to go get lunch with everybody, right? Like, why should I get any special treatment than anybody else? He used to stand online with the boys, and because of the fact that he just was so unassuming looking, that Rabbi Penner didn't even realize who he had bumped into when he was online. One of the, mamish, one of the gedolim. So just to point out his humility, and then he starts. If you take a look at line 14 on the first page over here, he says, "B'Tehillim, Kasev David HaMelech," that in Tehillim David HaMelech writes, "V'ani tefillah." He refers to himself. David HaMelech refers to himself as prayer. I am tefillah. Rav Tzadok HaGohen Lublin, line 15. Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, Mazmir, he explains that what David HaMelech meant is Shehamechus Shel David HaMelech, that the entire essence of David HaMelech, Haya Be'etzem Tefillah, was prayer. That the essence of David HaMelech was exactly what the essence of Tefillah is. Kolomar, this is to say, line 16, that David HaMelech Haya Mevin, David HaMelech understood Shu Klum Mul HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that in comparing himself to God, he's essentially nothing. His job in this world is to be an ambassador of God, not to be anything significant in comparison to God, but as just someone that is an extension of bringing God into this world. And therefore, everything that came from him, line 17, Ba'ama HaKadosh Baruch Hu, came from God. Hu haya be'etzem tefillah. That is tefillah. That is prayer. And that's what we had spoken about from the Maharal, where the Maharal, if we recall, a number of weeks ago, perhaps a couple months ago, we'd spoken about from the Maharal that's what the Maharal explained, that zevach risha'im to'eva, that the offerings of the wicked are dejected from God. The reason they're dejected from God is because a rasha looks at himself that I can make my own decisions of what is right and wrong in this world. I'm not dependent on what the morality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, of what ultimate truth is. I'm going to create my own morality in this world. And therefore, I can decide, I'm going to just do whatever I want to do. And then I think praying and offering offerings is also a good idea. That is something that is going to end up being dejected by God, because when a person comes to pray, they're supposed to come to the recognition of Hashem is Malokala Aretz Kvodo. God and all of his glory encompasses everything, both physically, spiritually, from a materialistic perspective. Everything is contained within the realm of what God wills there to be in the world. Morality is completely defined by God and his Torah and the way God manifests himself. And that is something we're supposed to learn from tefillah. Tefillah is connecting ourselves to that wholeness, that oneness, that unity of God. And if therefore someone rejects that unity to say that I can in a vacuum decide what is ethically correct or incorrect, then therefore I'm essentially rejecting the fact that there is this unity and this oneness of God, that everything, there's no bifurcating. I'm not saying that, I think it's a good idea to not murder, but I think that it's perfectly fine to steal. That is completely out of the realm of this wholesomeness of God, that every single aspect of the Torah, all 613 mitzvos, all of the 10 commandments, everything is designed into being an essence of God. So therefore, when one prays, they're reconnecting to that source, that unity, that oneness of God. David HaMelech is referring to himself as tefillah in that vein. Ani tefillah. I am someone who encompasses the essence of tefillah, that I am trying to reflect into the rest of the world what the ultimate ethical, moral code of God is. That is what David HaMelech was, and that's why he refers to himself as tefillah. Line 17, Hu haya be'etzem tefillah. He was in essence prayer. V'gam David HaMelech, and therefore David HaMelech, shehaya yachol liyo shakua begava. David HaMelech, line 18, David HaMelech he had every quote unquote right to be haughty. He's the king of Israel, right? I mean, he's royalty. He had technically the right, quote unquote, to be haughty, to be pompous. However, nevertheless, ubakalos, easily though, hayachol legroa mikvod shamayim, easily he could have detracted from the honor of heaven, right? This is why, by the way, one of the Kinyane Torah, one of the 48 ways of acquiring wisdom, is by, I was thinking it'd be a good thing for next year for that women's WhatsApp group, be a good thing, the 48 ways of wisdom. That one of the 48 ways of wisdom is to stay away from kavod. That the way to acquire Torah wisdom is staying away from kavod. It explains the Medrash Shmuel why is staying away from kavod so important to becoming a great Torah scholar. It says because it's very simple, that if a person is what will kavod tell a person? Kavod will tell a person that you've accomplished everything you need to accomplish in the realm of gaining higher and spiritual heights. That you've reached a sense of self-fulfillment and perfection, even perhaps, that I don't need to push myself anymore, right? All the adulations I'm receiving is telling me that I've accomplished so much already. I don't need to push myself anymore. Essentially, what that's going to end up doing is detracting from the kavod of Hashem, because ultimately what you are going to end up representing and Torah you are going to espouse is going to be Torah up to a certain limit. By saying that I'm not going to be pushing myself further is showing that Torah is limited, God is limited. And so therefore I need to run away from kavod. I need to run away from anything that's going to take me away from something that would bring down the honor of Hashem, right? And by pushing myself further in Torah, by gaining more from Hashem's Torah, I'm able to bring more of Hashem's Torah into the world without limit, and that is going to bring the ultimate kavod to Hashem. So easily David HaMelech could have taken imagine the kavod David HaMelech received. I mean, not from a lot of outsiders. David HaMelech had a very difficult life from some of his people that were against him, but nevertheless, he was David HaMelech. Only imagine the kavod that David HaMelech received could have very easily stopped his spiritual pursuits or slowed them down, right? David HaMelech the Gemara in Brachos talks about David HaMelech's schedule. David HaMelech's schedule was that he used to, according to one opinion of the Gemara, he didn't sleep at all. He just slept for a few breaths. He used to sleep for just 60 breaths a night. That was it, according to one opinion of the Gemara. He used to after midnight, he used to get up. There used to be a wind that would come and chime his harp that was hanging above his bed. He used to get up and start learning Torah throughout the night until the next night. Then he'd compose some Tehillim, and then he'd sleep just a little bit, and then he'd get up once again. Mamish for just 60 breaths is what it says in the Gemara. David HaMelech was always pushing himself to bring more kavod shamayim to this world. He looked at himself as like tefillah of how can I be a reflection of Hashem's unity, wholeness into the rest of the world. Were you going to say, Chaim?
I think it was Rabbi Jeff who told us that one of the reasons he had to be a descendant of Ruth was because he needed that from the Moabites, he needed that what's the word? I'm going blank on the word. The opposite of humanity.
The arrogance.
The haughtiness.
Yeah.
To have, as a king, you needed some of that, and that's why he had to be a descendant.
Oh, really?
Of
Interesting.
But he
obviously overcame that. Yeah, obviously overcame that. So that's now, So he continues to read, he says, "Mipnei shehu haya hamelech." It would be easy for him to detract from God's glory due to the fact that he was king, but David Melech would never do such a thing. Line 19, Aval David Melech haya anaf. David Melech, though, was completely humble. B'chol mehuso hayarak kedei l'shakeif et haor shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. His entire demeanor, his entire essence was just to be able to give off the light of God. That was what David Melech, he was just there to reflect the light of God. That's how he viewed himself. That's why he refers to himself as tefillah, because that's exactly what tefillah is. Tefillah is connecting yourself, transcending yourself to that level of understanding Hashem's unity, meaning his wholesomeness, comprising all of morality and spirituality, and then reproducing that into the rest of our lives. And that's why David Melech refers to himself, Va'ani Tefillah. I am Tefillah. Line 21, next paragraph, the bottom paragraph on page 1. He says, another proof that we find how David Melech was a reflection of God is, he writes over here, quoting from the Ramah, that the Ramah of Moshe Isserlis. Moshe Isserlis was that Shulchan Aruch was written by Rabbi Yosef Kar. We're going to discuss it more tonight at Life's Biggest Questions, the third and final part of the series we started before Shavuos. We're talking about what exactly happened at Har Sinai in terms of the mass revelation. Then last week we discussed, on Thursday night, we discussed when we received the Torah at Har Sinai. What does that mean? We received the Torah, and then tonight what we're going to discuss is how we got from Torah at Sinai to Torah that we follow in 2022 in La Jolla, California. That how did the halachic system develop in such a way that we follow what we follow right now? So the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Code of Jewish Law, was written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, 1480 to 1575. And the Ramah of Moshe Isserlis wrote annotations to the Shulchan Aruch that he would bring in the Ashkenaz minhag in certain things. So the Ramah writes in his commentary on Shulchan Aruch in the laws of Kiddush Lavana. He says in line 21, "V'noag in Lomar," the minhag is to say, David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, to say the line that David Melech Yisrael is alive and is here. Shemalchuso Nimshal Levanov. We say David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, that David Melech's kingship is lasting. We say that in Kiddush Lavana, when we make the blessing on the new moon. Why do we say that line of David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam? So it says the Ramah, the reason is Shel Malchuso, because David HaMelech's kingship was Nimshal L'Levana. It's compared to a moon. It's compared to a moon. Now, how was David HaMelech's kingship compared to a moon? So he writes in the middle of line 22, Hamalchus Shel David HaMelech Mishavah Liyareach, that David HaMelech's kingship is just like a moon. Mishum, because line 23, Shehi Pashut Mashkefet, because all a moon does is reflect. It reflects the light of the sun. That's why Reb Tzadok HaKohen Milublin explains the bracha we give to a baby at a bris milah. At a bris milah, we give a bracha to a baby. We say, Zeh HaKatan Gadol Yihiyeh, that this small one should become a big one. Now, what is that bracha? We're saying that the child should grow up to be an adult. What do we just say? He grows in size. What is the bracha when we say Zeh HaKatan? This small one should become a gadol, should become a big one. So Reb Tzadok points out that we have a Masorah that if you want to truly understand the words in the Hebrew language, you have to look at the context in which they're used the very first place in the Torah. The context that the word katan and gadol, small and big, are used in the Torah for the first time is referring to the luminaries. The Torah tells us that God created the Ma'or HaGadol, the large luminary, referring to the sun, and the Ma'or HaKatan, the small luminary, referring to the moon. What's the difference between the sun and the moon? Points out Reb Tzadok. The difference between the sun and the moon is that the sun gives off its own light versus the moon that gives off reflected light. Zeh hakaton, we give a bracha to the child. This katon, this moon, right now the child is just the moon. Children are just reflection of their parents. That's what they are until they reach a certain age, that hopefully they don't live their entire life as just being a reflection of their parents. No parent wants their child to just, for the rest of their life, just be a reflection of just being at home. A parent wants that the child becomes independent and independently is contributing to the Jewish people and to society that they live in. That's what every parent wants. Every child wants that everything they learn from home, they should take with them to provide their own light into the rest of the world. Zehakaton gadol yiyeh should be like the sun that gives off its own light, not just reflected light. David HaMelech's kingship was one of reflection. It was reflecting the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Line 23 in the middle.
So wouldn't you want?
So you would want. So I think Rav Tzadok's point was that was the light of its parents, meaning right now what the child is reflecting the light of its parents. We want it to give off its own light, but we want that the light that it gives off turns from a reflection from the parents into a reflection of Hashem. So we should put a little note in. I should put a little note in my Tzidkas HaTzadik. I should put a little note in my.
It's like reflecting the light of Hashem, but internalizing it so it becomes your own.
Correct. Yes. Line 23 in the middle. Hayareach hu davar madhim, aval kishmistaklim alav kol ma sheroim hu haor shel Hashem. That the moon is very beautiful. It gives off light, but everything you're looking at, when you look at it, all you're looking at is really the light of the sun. Line 24 towards the end. V'chein hayam mitzir shel David HaMelech. Line 25. This also was this is the essence of David HaMelech. David HaMelech hitzliach lakum lihiyot melech. David HaMelech was successful in becoming king. Ubechal ha'anava shelo. However, due to his humility, b'shum ofen lo paga hayichola shel am Yisrael, that not once did he prevent the Jewish people from being able to look at him as Haribona Shel Olam. That by looking at him and looking at what he had done, it was just giving off the light of Hashem. Meaning, no one, when the Jewish people, when we look to David HaMelech as a model, we don't look to David HaMelech as look at what King David in of himself did, but look at what David HaMelech reflected. Look at what he gave off from on high to the rest of the world. Not in a vacuum, not in the vacuum of David HaMelech, but in the reflection of David HaMelech from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what David HaMelech has continued to accomplish for us, right? Tehillim. We don't read Tehillim and think of it as us connecting ourselves to David HaMelech. We read Tehillim and it connects us to the Rabbanu Shalom. It connects us to Hashem. In fact, we read Tehillim when it's of the most emotional tefillos that we're looking to accomplish. We're looking to connect ourselves as most directly to Hashem as we can. It's interesting. That's the type. That is the author we go to. The author we go to is the one who is ani tefillah. We go to the author when we need to connect to Hashem most. We go to Tehillim. We go to the greatest reflection of Hashem's light in the form of tefillah that we have. Now we go to David HaMelech because it's not that we're turning to him. We're turning to the light that he gave off as a reflection from Hashem. They wrote it Pnei Hashama, to look at the light of the sun. And then he connects it back to Rav Lichtenstein in line 27. Zehu gamkin haya demu shel Rav Lichtenstein tatzah. This also was Rav Lichtenstein. Nava Shalo on the back page. The humility of Rav Lichtenstein, line 1. Natan efsharus l'talmidav is what was so great about Rav Lichtenstein is that he gave the ability for a student lerot et hashchina to see the to see Hashem's presence. That through the way Rav Lichtenstein was as a mechanech, that he was not having his students look at him in this, like kind of cult fashion of there was something that was significant in and of itself of our Rebbe. But what was significant about our Rebbe is that he was able to connect us to Hashem. And he gives different examples of this. Line number 2. Sitting by Rav Lichtenstein, you're able to feel the presence of Hashem. Sitting in his daily class, you're able to feel the connection to Hashem. Here Rav Lichtenstein because Rav Lichtenstein was living through the reflection of the presence of God. He was living with a recognition of God. Zu Haya Rabbeinu, this was our rabbi, this was our teacher. Line number 5, Hani Zocher Hadaris Pnei Rabbeinu Achre Neila. The Rabbi Penner reflects on the fact that he remembers seeing Rav Lichtenstein after Neila. Haya Milim Letaris Hapanim Shalo. There are no words to probably describe what his face looked like, but it was really like the reflection of the Shekhinah. I mean, I've seen Rav Shechter and also like that. I mean, Rav Shechter after Neila also. So it's like this. These are a proper mechanech, a proper gadol knows that they are not here. It's not about them, but it's about what they're representing, and it's about that they are people that are totally connected to Hashem and are able to provide that light for those that have the opportunity to learn from them. And then in line number 7, he points out that Rav Lichtenstein, when he was giving a hesped, he was giving a eulogy for his father. So Rav Lichtenstein quoted a Gemara that says that the way a person is able to live their life, the highest level, the Gemara in Pesachim tells us, if you want to look, it's on line 14. The Gemara in Pesachim on Kuf Yud Gimel tells us, this is what Rav Lichtenstein said about his father. The Gemara says the following: Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, line 14. Rabbi Yochanan said, Shlosha minochle olam haba. There are 3 categories of people that are nochle olam haba, that inherit the world to come. And inheritance is different than someone that just gets to go to olam haba. Someone who gets to go to olam haba, they're just there. Someone who inherits olam haba, it's like it's theirs. So who is someone that is menochle olam haba? The Gemara says 3 types of people. Elohim. Number 1, line 15, Hadar be'Eretz Yisrael, someone that lives in Eretz Yisrael. V'hamagadol banav l'talmud Torah, someone who raises their children to study Torah. And then number 3, and these first two we can understand, right? You can understand that by living in Eretz Yisrael, that is, I mean, it's already basically living in Olam Haba, right? It makes sense how a person develops in such a way by living in the land of Israel that they're able to mamish inherit the world to come. A person that raises their children to be B'nai Torah, of course, also that's accomplishing the entire goal of Puruvu. We don't believe in just procreation for the sake of procreation and that's it. We believe in procreation for the sake of bringing more Torah, of perpetuating the Jewish people, as we spoke about Shavuos night, perpetuating the Jewish people through with the Torah, and even sacrificing ourselves for that goal, doing it from a place of love and simcha, of course. But that's our goal, is to be able to provide for the next generation an avenue into becoming people that are connected to the Torah. So we can understand those 2. But look at the third one. The third one on the list is very difficult to understand. At the end of line 15. V'hamavdil al hayayin b'motzei Shabbosos. Someone makes Havdalah on Saturday night. So the Gemara wants to help us understand this a little bit more. Ma'hi, what does that mean? The Meshayer mikidusha la'avdalasa. That someone that leaves from their wine by Kiddush into their wine for Havdalah. And that's a person, right? They ensure that they have enough wine for Kiddush and Havdalah. That's a person that can inherit.
Because I think you're not supposed to do anything in Shabbat where you're thinking about, sort of preparing for something afterwards.
This is you have to make sure that you have enough wine for Kiddush and Havdalah. That's someone that is going to inherit the world. That's like it's at the same level of people that live in Eretz Yisrael and people that raise their children to the next generation, like Kiddush and Havdalah. So the way that most of the commentaries explain is because that's a person that inherits the world to come. A person that inherits the world to come is someone that is reflecting Kedusha into the mundane, right? Where I can take the Kedusha of Shabbos and I bring it into Havdalah. That when I separate from Shabbos and I'm moving into the rest of the week, it's coming with Shabbos. Shabbos is, it's not, I'm not living I'm not just working for 6 days and then resting on Shabbos. I'm doing Shabbos, and that allows me to work for 6 days. Shabbos is what brings me into the rest of the week, not that the rest of the week brings me into Shabbos. Looking from a different week, Shabbos is not the weekend, it's the beginning of the week. That is someone that's going to be Nochle Olam Haba, because a person is reflecting the Kedusha, it's reflecting the holiness of Shabbos, it's reflecting it's reflecting Emunah, which is what Shabbos is ultimately supposed to bring us to, that high level of Emunah. It's bringing that Emunah into the rest of our lives. And that's the ultimate goal of Tefillah, as we learned from David Amel. The ultimate goal of Tefillah is Ani Tefillah. I am Tefillah. I am someone that, as the Maharal points out, when I connect to that Emunah, when I connect to that oneness, I connect to that unity, I connect to that understanding of Hashem's all-encompassing nature in the spiritual and material realms, I have an impact on my life. That is what the whole essence of Tefillah is supposed to be. That's what David HaMelech was able to accomplish. And that's what our goal is supposed to be on a daily and weekly basis, trying to take all of our Kedusha and have it affect the rest of our lives. Every single day when we daven, that's what we're supposed to do, bring that and we're going to discuss also how this breaks into the 3 different times a day we daven, because each one represents something else, and that we have to bring that Kedusha into the different aspects of our day, bring that Emunah with us into each aspect of our lives. That's the ultimate goal of prayer. If we had to sum up all of prayer in one thing, it's that line from David Melech, Ani Tefillah, turning yourself into prayer, turning yourself into that reflection of Emunah into the rest of our lives. Okay. We'll stop here for now. Just a housekeeping note. I'm going to be like in and out of, just because it's the summer, I'm going to be in and out of a little bit of vacation. So I'm pretty sure the next 3 weeks we're off, taking a little bit of a break. I have to jump. It's either the next 2 weeks or the next 3 weeks. I forget what I'd written down on the calendar. But then when we get back, we're back to a steady schedule, what I want to do is I want to start going through. I want to finish up that book from Rabbi Pincus of Sha'arim B'Tefillah, and then we'll do that relatively quickly, because the book can be a little bit repetitive sometimes. So we're not going to just go through the whole thing straight. We're just going to go through the highlights, and then I want to just get right into Shmona Esrei and just breaking down Shmona Esrei, and use that as the springboard to be able to have more of these discussions about prayer, and then into, of course, the particulars about Shmona Esrei itself. Okay, good. All right. We'll stop here for now.